7 sinister cases of strangers hidden behind walls. Terrifying secrets finally revealed. In the quiet suburb of Springfield, under the facade of perfectly trimmed lawns and bright facades, something sinister stirred in the shadows. Claire Johnson had hoped for a fresh start, surrounded by friendly neighbors in this seemingly perfect haven. But as the sun dipped below the row of identical houses, an unsettling tension bloomed in the air, wrapping around her like a thick fog of dread. The joyful laughter of children faded into the hush of evening, leaving Claire isolated with her newborn, racing heartbeats the only rhythm that filled the silence. It started with soft whispers, barely audible at first, weaving through the thin walls of her new home. Claire shook it off, attributing the sound to the settling of the old structure. But the longer she listened, the more she felt the weight of unseen eyes watching her. Each night, as shadows danced in the fading light, the scratching began scrapes against wood that chilled her bones and made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Panic knotted her stomach as sleep deprivation twisted reality, blurring the edges of her thoughts. Are these noises warnings or mere figments of a stressed-out imagination? She whispered to herself, navigating the clockwork of motherhood alone. She clutched her baby tightly, as if the warmth of his tiny body could shield her from whatever lurked beyond. Night after night, her paranoia crescendoed. Faces that once seemed friendly turned strange. The mailman's smile felt more like a smirk, and the single mother down the street scared her with her overzealous attention to Claire and her child. Suddenly, everyone felt suspicious. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. One night, unable to shake the grip of dread, Claire mustered every ounce of courage and resolve to investigate. Armed only with a flashlight, its shaky beams slicing through the darkness, she ventured into the narrow hallways. The air was thick with silence, every creak of the floor triggering a jolt of fear. Pushing her way into the attic, she stumbled across dusty boxes, the remnants of lives lived before her. But it wasn't the dust that caught her breath. It was the old newspaper clippings tucked away at the back. Each headline screamed of disappearances, strange occurrences that sent a chill down her spine. With each sordid detail, Claire's heart raced, the evidence stacking against her notion of safety. The stories were tied to her new neighborhood, a web of secrets lurking behind the very walls that watched her. Just when she thought she had pieced together the horror, a scream echoed through the night, slicing the still air. A child's voice, urgent and terrified. Paralyzed by fear, Claire stood at the threshold of her darkened hallway, the shadows closing in around her. The truth clawed at her mind. Was she supposed to uncover the secret, or was it safer to retreat into the comforting shadows of her home? The door that separated her from whatever horrors lay outside seemed to pulse in rhythm with her racing heart. A sudden knock reverberated through the stillness, sending her heart into a frenzy. Who, or what, was on the other side? The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on her chest. She was no longer alone, and something primal told her the time had come to make a choice. Claire's breath hitched as she tightened her grip on the flashlight, its beam flickering as if faltering under the weight of dread. That knock resounded again, louder, more insistent this time. The wood of the door seemed to tremble under the force. Panic clawed at her throat. Should she answer? Or should she run? With a final, shuddering breath, she cast a glance down the darkened hallway, her instincts pushing her towards the door. Each step felt like an eternity, the wood cool beneath her fingertips, beads of sweat forming at her brow. The hairs on her arms stood on end as she pressed her ear against the door, listening intently. Silence. Just as she turned the handle, a childish giggle echoed outside, the sound piercing through her fear like a knife. Mom, help me. It was her son's voice, innocent yet laced with panic. Claire's heart raced as she flung the door open, the action sending a wash of cold air biting into her skin. She was met with nothing but the inky blackness of the night. The streetlights outside flickered, their light casting long shadows, transforming familiar shapes into menacing specters. "Where are you?" she called out, her voice shaking in the breezy night. "Mom." "In the closet." Her mind reeled. Her baby was safe in his crib, so who? Feeling a chill creep down her spine, she forced herself to step outside, each step crunching against the gravel. She hesitated before the darkened yard, her gaze sweeping the surrounding houses. They loomed like silent witnesses, their windows black and unyielding. Every instinct screamed for her to retreat, yet she pressed on, compelled by the frantic plea. The closet in her memory was the small, unassuming square in the corner of the dim hallway, packed with coats and old shoes. With trepidation, she opened the creaking door, the musty air assaulting her senses. Her heart pounded as she stood there in the threshold, her flashlight barely illuminating the depths of its shadows. "Please come out," Claire managed to shout, but the answer was silence, a silence that bore down on her, heavy and suffocating. Panic bubbled in her chest. What if this was a trick? What if there was nobody at all? Gritting her teeth, she stepped inside, pushing hanging clothes aside. The oppressive darkness pressed in around her, and just as she was about to lose hope, a small, cold hand grasped her wrist. Shock jolted through her like electricity. Claire gasped and spun around, shining her flashlight into the small, hidden corner. Instead of her son, there stood a child she had never seen before, pallid skin, eyes wide and shining. They reflected her light. "Help," the child whispered, as the closet door creaked painfully back on its hinges. Suddenly, the sounds of footsteps echoed from behind her, heavy, deliberate, too close. Each step pinched at the edge of her sanity, an urgency thrumming beneath her skin. Was this child real? Or was it yet another cruel trick of the night? Then she felt it, a presence behind her, cold breath on her neck. Turning back, Claire stumbled as the oppressive darkness accelerated around her, choking out her screams. Was it all an illusion? Or had she just walked into a trap? Her heart tried to explode from her chest, a visceral fear spurring her to escape as she felt a grip tighten around her wrist, pulling her deeper into the hidden darkness. What awaited her in the shadows behind the walls was unfathomable. The sinister grip of the unknown wrapped around her, and the child's desperate whispers echoed louder, suggesting a truth she wasn't ready to uncover. Claire had stumbled upon something far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. But as her vision blurred, she realized the voices were calling, urging her closer to the heart of the terror. Would she delve deeper into the secrets entwined in her new home, or flee from the tangled web of horror that awaited? The shadows shifted around her like restless spirits, holding their breath for her next move. Claire was out of options, and whatever lurked just beyond the darkness would not wait for her. Decision. Would the truth be her salvation, or her doom? The world tilted as Claire's heart thumped relentlessly in her chest. She was trapped inside a closet that felt more like a tomb. The child's grip tightened, a bone-chilling cold seeping into her skin. The small face looked up at her with eyes that shimmered, reflecting horror instead of innocence. It tugged, a silent plea echoing in the depths of her mind. Help! But from whom? Just outside the door, the footsteps had ceased, a suffocating silence gripping the air. Had they heard her? Was whatever stalked her outside now watching? She didn't dare breathe, as if that might summon it. "Who are you?" Claire's voice came out, a trembling whisper, drowned by the ominous shadows encroaching upon her. The child only tilted its head, a shadowy grin spreading slowly across its ghastly face, eyes darkening, shifting with an unnatural light. The grip around her wrist loosened, but the child didn't let go. Instead, it stepped back, revealing an exit into the further depths of darkness behind the closet wall, an opening Claire hadn't noticed before. It felt like a void swallowing the little light that remained. "Follow," the child beckoned, voice a haunting echo. Bile rose in Claire's throat. Every instinct screamed for her to run, to flee the terrible sight, but she felt her body moving against her will, drawn deeper into the dark. The air thickened as she stepped forward, a malignant force embracing her like a shroud. With the child leading her deeper, the chilling shadows draped haunting shapes upon the walls. Old photographs lined the corridor, each one filled with once bright smiles, now distorted and grotesque. She stumbled, the flashlight flickering wildly, unable to catch up to the terrifying panorama unfolding before her eyes. "Don't look at them, Mom," The child hissed, the words slicing through the air. Her heart seized as she caught a quick glimpse of a photo just past the dark threshold. Her face, twisted in fear, standing with her son, but the place behind them was overrun with shadows, crawling in the corners of the frame as if alive. "What is this?" Claire gasped, turning back to the child, but it was gone. Now utterly alone, panic surged anew. The space felt alive, pulsating with malice. Claire's flashlight died, plunging her into an oppressive blackness. Not darkness that simply veils the light, but something much more sinister, a hungry void, waiting for her to succumb. Claire, a whisper slithered through the air, slinking around her like a serpent. It came again, closer this time, a voice tinged with familiarity. It pierced her heart, a twisted echo of her own thoughts. "Mom, help me!" The familiar timbre wrapped around her like a noose. It was unmistakably her son's, but it echoed with an otherworldly resonance, laden with despair. Clenching her fists, Claire fought the gravitational pull of despair. She took a step back, then another. The call was drawing her in, entrapment whispering sweetly in her ear. "Stay away," she cried out, turning to the dark alleyway from which she had come. But the way she had entered was swallowed, collapsing into a wall firm and unyielding, leaving her trapped in a labyrinth of nightmares. One foot after another, she walked further into the suffocating shadows. The sound of her own heartbeat throbbed, resonating with the irregular thump of her pulse echoed against the silent walls. "Mom," the voice called again, seemingly right behind her now, the warmth of her child's touch lingering just out of reach. Was it truly him? Or a deception that would lead her to the brink? A cold breeze swept through the corridor, stirring a voice from the depths, softer but sharper. "Join us." Dread tightened around her throat. No, whatever they were, she would not become one of them. "Get away from me," she screamed, desperate to break free from the suffocating grip of the darkness. But the walls seemed to close in, forcing her deeper into their deadly embrace. Her instinct to survive flared, yet every path forward opened into thicker shadows, into secrets clawing at her sanity. Tears streamed down her face as she fought, through the insistent darkness pulling her down. What was out there? What waited for her to take one wrong step? The terror thickened around her, waiting, as the walls whispered their secrets, and Claire stood poised at the edge of her greatest fear. Would the truth she sought bring freedom, or seal her fate? The choice lay ahead, but in the throat of the abyss, the next step could be her last. Claire stumbled forward, heart racing, breaths coming in sharp gasps. The whispers wrapped around her like a shroud, each soft word scratching at her resolve. They echoed with the voice of her son, but something was gravely wrong. "Mom, I'm scared." The plea twisted, transforming into a silence punctuated by her rising dread. It felt like the walls were breathing around her, pulsating in sick, rhythmic thuds that matched her own racing heartbeat. Despair pricked her skin like icy fingers, urging her to stay to answer the haunting call. "No, you're not real," she shouted, the words tearing from her throat as she clawed for sanity. Yet, her voice bled into the darkness, fading away like smoke. No response followed. Nothing but her rapid breathing and the gaping void exhaling its secrets. She could almost feel the walls closing in. Each step forward felt like a betrayal of her instincts, like she was willingly entering a nightmare. What lay in wait? She turned, heart pounding against her ribcage, but the darkness held her firmly in its grip. The fragile veneer of hope shattered. "Mom, please." It came again, closer, sharper, an insistent whimper that drove daggers into her heart. "Stop it," Claire cried, but the echo only twisted her fear into something darker. She clenched her hands into fists, nails biting into her palms, grounding herself amidst the horror. The memories of her son flooded her thoughts, his laughter, the games they played, and the overwhelming love she felt. But was that love enough to fight this malevolence? She took a deep breath, willing the warmth of her memories to shield her from the cold dread creeping ever closer. "Where are you?" she gasped, fighting against the rising tide of despair threatening to swallow her whole. The air grew thicker, almost tangible, as if it had its own will. In a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, Claire thought of the child, the creature that had led her here. Where had it gone? Why was she still alone? Panic bubbled within her, urging her to move. Not forward, but anywhere else. I won't give in, she screamed, her voice wavering yet defiant. The darkness around her seemed to pulse in reply, as if reacting to her strength. The low whispers transformed into sinister laughter, filling her ears with cold malice. Suddenly, a flicker of light pierced the inky blackness, illuminating a distant doorway. Hope ignited within her, but a gnawing uncertainty gnawed at her. Was it truly an escape, or another trap waiting to snap shut? No more lies. No more games. She shouted back at the shadows, forcing herself to move toward the light. Each step felt like pushing against the tide, the whispers crescendoing into a chorus that rattled through her bones. As she approached the doorway, Claire felt the essence of countless souls swirling around her, voices intertwining into a cacophony of terror and longing. What secrets did they hold? Were they prisoners like her? Mom, I need you. The voice twisted again, desperate and tortured. Claire's vision blurred as tears streamed down her face. Could she trust it? With one last surge of defiance, she reached for the glimmering light, fingers scraping against the cool surface of the door. But just as she pushed through, it swung violently back, releasing a tidal wave of darkness that slammed into her. She was thrown backwards, a rush of icy despair crashing over her like a wave. She fell, gasping, as the whispers dulled into a low hum, sinking beneath the weight of something far more menacing. Claire felt it before she saw it. The ominous silence that followed the crash resonated with an undeniable threat. Something had awakened. The shadows shifted, swirling around her in a grotesque dance, coalescing into a dark form slowly rising. You wish to join us, it rasped, a voice layered with agony and mockery. Her heart dropped into the pit of her stomach. If she had fallen into their lair, what would it take to escape? Claire scrambled to her feet, terror cutting through the darkness like a blade. She had to move, had to fight against whatever had come for her. But was running even an option? And as she darted toward the remaining shadows, the unsettling realization hit her: the child had not disappeared. It watched from the shadows, eyes glinting like icy stars. What fate awaited her in their realm? Get away from me, Claire yelled into the darkness, but it only tightened around her like a strangling vine. What awaited her next? Would she uncover the terrifying truth, or was she destined to be lost among the whispers? The shape solidified before her, a contorted figure wrapped in darkness that exuded a palpable dread. Claire felt as if her heart had skipped a beat, the breath caught in her throat. The whispers became a tempest of screams, piercing through her with an urgency that threatened to shatter her resolve. With each passing second, the figure grew clearer. Its eyes burned with a hellish glow that bore into her soul. You cannot leave, it hissed, each word dripping with malice. Claire's instincts screamed for her to flee, but her body felt paralyzed, anchored to the ground by fear. Beneath the creature's voice, the whispers continued their relentless assault, weaving tales of despair, stories of souls lost, of lives extinguished in the depths of this dark space. She shut her eyes tight against them, focusing instead on a single thought: her son. Mom, I'm here. The child's voice emerged, sweet and innocent, cutting through the horror like a knife. But then it twisted again. Help me. The anguish tore through her, igniting a fire within her desperate spirit. Leave him alone, Claire screamed, feeling a surge of adrenaline push her instinct into action. She darted toward the shadows where the child's voice had emerged, every ounce of strength pouring into her limbs. As she moved, the shadows clawed at her, pulling her back as if they had a will of their own. Fingers of darkness wrapped around her wrists and ankles, but Claire fought, twisting and jerking, refusing to succumb. She could see it, then the flicker of a small form amid the shadows. Claire, it was the child, trembling and small, eyes wide with fear, glimmering in the darkness. But the light around him warped and distorted, pulling him away. Claire reached out, her fingers grazing his arm, warmth radiating through the chill of the void. As soon as their skin touched, a shockwave of icy despair slammed into her. Images burst through her mind, unspeakable events, twisted visions of the trapped and tortured. The creature's form began to shudder as if it were unhinging, feeding off her terror. You will join us, it roared, the voice an amalgamation of countless wails. Claire recoiled, feeling the room contract around them, squeezing tight, suffocating. Remember, no one escapes. shaking as she held her son's gaze. She felt the fabric of reality rippled around them. She could almost hear the darkness breathing, waiting for her to surrender. "I want he never," Claire shouted defiantly, and with that, her eyes burned with fierce determination. She grasped the child's hand, feeling a tether formed between them, raw and powerful. While the darkness crawled menacingly toward her, she pulled the boy forward, locking eyes with the twisted figure. "We will escape this hell," the shadows hissed, furious, as they struggled against their bond. Claire could feel the strength of the creature's rage washed over her like a storm, but the boy's grip tightened, too. Together, they pushed against the encroaching shadows. The air shifted suddenly as the walls began to tremble like an angry beast. Cracks spiderwebbed across them, lights slicing through, illuminating forms of faces trapped, their mouths gaping in silent screams. "What are you? What do you want from us?" Claire's voice cracked. She felt the weight of their despair pressing harder. "We want you." The creature shrieked in an avalanche of voices, vibrating through the walls and shaking the ground beneath her. "You must stay. You must feed." But as it screamed, a blinding light surged into the space, illuminating every corner, banishing shadows yet clinging to her. Claire squeezed her son's hand tighter, ignoring the chaos around her. With one final force, they dashed through the light, pushing against the darkness that threatened to absorb them whole. And just as they broke free, a chilling voice echoed behind them. "You'll never forget us." Claire was yanked from the nightmare, breathless. Was it over? Had they truly escaped? Or had they just begun a more horrifying chapter? With the darkness gnawing at the edges of her sanity, Claire turned to her son, snapping her gaze back into the uncertain world ahead of them. "Mom." His voice cracked, small and vulnerable. She felt the shadows lurking alive, waiting. What had they unleashed? A cold sweat broke across her skin as Claire whispered to herself, "This isn't over." Claire's breath came in ragged gasps, a cold sweat trickling down her back. The world around her felt foreign, distorted, as if reality had slipped through her fingers like sand. She scanned the dimly lit street, searching for signs of safety. Shadows clung to every corner, stretching long and foreboding, making her grip tighten around her son's hand. "Where are we?" the boy asked, his innocence stark against the dark that surrounded them. The question hung heavy in the air, filled with an urgency that was undeniable. "I don't know," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. The air felt thick and stale, like a damp cloth clinging to her skin. She turned to reassure her son, but was met instead by the lingering echoes of the creature's voice, seeping into her mind. "You'll never forget us." What did that even mean? Doubling back, she strained to look at the street behind them, half expecting to see the creature or the shadows once again casting their darkness. A chill ran down her spine. The street looked normal, yet she knew better. "Mom." The child tugged at her hand. "There." He pointed toward a house, its porch light flickering ominously. "Stay close," Claire responded, heart pounding. They moved toward the house, each step echoing in her ears like thunder. The front door was slightly ajar, creaking softly as if beckoning them inside. The interior was dark, a bitter mix of mold and something sweeter, something wrong. She shivered, looking down the hall. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the quiet ticking of a clock somewhere in the shadows. It felt like a heartbeat counting down. As they stepped deeper inside, every nerve in Claire's body screamed to turn back. But something pushed her onward: fear, desperation, or the haunting memory of the boy's voice crying for help. "We have to find a way out," she said, almost to herself. Suddenly, a sound shattered the stillness. A low, guttural growl came from a room at the end of the hallway. Instinctively, she dropped to her knees, pulling her son beside her. "Mom, I can't," he whimpered, eyes wide with terror. She held his shoulders tightly. "I need you to be brave, okay? Just a little longer." The growling grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards, raw with hunger and malice. Claire's heart raced. What had they stumbled into? Peering into the room, a flicker of light met her gaze, a fireplace radiating warmth, presenting a stark contrast to the dread pooling in her stomach. But it was not the flickering flames that drew her attention. It was the heavy, grotesque shapes shifting in the shadows. Figures twisted and contorted, their faces masked in despair, mouths working silently against the emptiness that surrounded them. "What are they?" The boy whispered, voice quivering. I don't know, Claire stammered, a knot forming in her throat. The figures began to turn, their hollow eyes meeting hers, their silent screams cut through her resolve. Help us, save us, they mouthed, the words forming a chilling echo in her mind. She stumbled back, her breath quickening, feeling the panic rise. No, no, we have to go? But as she turned to flee, that growl intensified, a monstrous voice rising from deep within the shadows. Join us, Claire hissed, the darkness shifting, swirling, as if trying to consume everything in its path. With tears streaming down her face, Claire gripped her son tighter and darted down the hallway, the shadows clawing at her back. Run, she shouted, her voice cracking. They dashed towards a door, desperately pushing against it. But as they barely escaped, a chilling laugh echoed behind them, a sound filled with malice and hunger. Where do you think you're going? Adrenaline surged as they bolted out into the cool night air, but Claire couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows had followed them, lurking in the corners of her mind. Was this truly freedom, or just the threshold of a darker nightmare? With her heart racing, Claire looked at the boy beside her, his fear mirroring her own. Mom, what now? He asked, the innocence in his voice slicing through the night. Silence. Claire swallowed hard. They had escaped the house, but the battle was far from over. We find out what they want, and we end this for good. And as they turned to face the unknown, a distant whisper echoed through the air. You'll never be free, never. The shadows encircled them, a suffocating promise of terror to come. What had they awakened? Would they survive the ensuing darkness, or had they walked straight into a new nightmare? The air outside felt electric, charged with an unnameable threat. Claire pressed her back against the rough exterior of the house, heart thundering like a jackhammer. The night was alive, the wind shrieking through the trees, but all she could hear was that mockery echoing in her mind. Keep running, she urged, pulling her son away from the sinister house and closer to the empty street. They crossed over cracked asphalt, the moonlight bathing their path in a ghostly glow. The shadows danced at the edges of her vision, looming closer, whispering taunts that twisted around her heart. Mom, where are we going? He panted, struggling to keep up. His little legs trembled, and she couldn't remember when she last saw a familiar street. Somewhere safe, she shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. They turned a corner, and the shadows flickered again, dropping down like a curtain, closing off their escape. Mom, he cried, his voice rising in panic as they slowed to a halt in front of a large, abandoned building. Its windows sat shattered like broken teeth, dark and cavernous. A sense of dread crawled over Claire's skin, but there was no time to hesitate. They rushed inside, brushing past crumbling walls and a fallen door. The stench hit them like a wall, sour and rancid, a mix of rot and neglect. Claire squinted, trying to make out shapes in the dimness, but every creak of the wood echoed like a footstep behind them. She didn't dare look back. Stay close, she whispered fiercely, gripping her son's hand as they stumbled deeper into the structure. Every shadow felt like eyes, watching and waiting. Mom, I see something. He pointed ahead, his little voice quavering. Claire squinted into the dim light, her pulse quickening. There, deep in the heart of the building, a faint glow seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It drew her like a moth to a flame, but caution nagged at her instincts. We shouldn't, but before she could finish, the boy pulled free and darted forward. It's okay, he assured her, though his fear vibrated in the air between them. I think it's safe. Come back, she hissed, the panic rising in her throat. Too late. He was already moving into the light, stepping onto a patch of cracked tile that glinted ominously. Claire followed, breath hitching as she reached for him. As they entered the glowing room, Claire froze. The air shimmered thick with energy, and the light was brighter than any source she'd seen before. But it came from a massive mural on the wall, a grotesque depiction of figures, those same hollow-eyed shapes she had seen in the other house. Help us, save us, they seemed to whisper once again, but this time it felt different. They were not just figures on a wall. They were alive somehow, trapped in a vacuous embrace. Mom, the boy shrieked, pointing at a shadow moving within the light. A single figure stepped forward, a silhouette defined by darkness, a face she recognized, twisted and tortured, eyes shining with a familiar desperation. "Help us." Claire, it was a voice she knew, but time seemed to freeze. Her reality stretched painfully before her. "No," she shrieked, stumbling backwards, fear surging through her. "You can't be here. It's not over." The figure rasped, a chilling reminder of what they had encountered. As Claire struggled to breathe, the walls seemed to pulse, and the light flickered dangerously. The echo of laughter twisted ridiculed her escape, setting her senses aflame. "Mom, she looks like me." Her son gasped, his voice laced with horror, but any reply caught in Claire's throat. With every heartbeat, the walls closed in, the shadows thickening around her and her son. "We have to go?" Claire screamed, grabbing the boy's hand once more. But as they turned to flee, the entrance they came through shimmered like a mirage, shifting as if reality itself were unraveling. "You can't escape, Claire. Not now. Not ever," the figures hissed in unison. They were trapped, and outside loomed an endless void of shadows. Mom, her son's voice trembled, filled with dread. The room darkened, walls bleeding into shadows, tightening around them like a noose. Claire's heart raced as she prepared to embrace the oncoming terror, knowing that whatever lay ahead was worse than she could ever imagine. And then the walls trembled once again, revealing a different door, glowing a bright red against the dim chaos. A glimmer of hope, or an even deeper nightmare. What if it's a trick? Claire whispered, fear creeping back in. Would they dare step through it? Just as her mind raced, a chilling voice echoed through the room. "Choose wisely, Claire, or lose everything." Claire's breath quickened as her eyes darted between the pulsing mural and the ominous red door. The shadows pressed in closer, and time seemed to twist around her. Her instincts screamed that whatever lay beyond that glowing threshold might be worse than the horrors she had already faced. "Mom, I want to go through," her son urged, clutching her hand tightly, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. It might be the way out. She wanted to comfort him. She wanted to reassure him that everything would be okay. But the faces on the mural, pleading silently, sent her heart plummeting. "We don't know what's on the other side. Maybe it's the way to save everyone," he stammered. Candlelight flickered in his voice, fragile and desperate against the expanding darkness. But before she could respond, the whispering voices grew louder, intertwining with the chaos swirling around them. "Choose, choose, choose." It was a chant that enveloped Claire, pulling at her sanity. The figures in the mural twisted, their hollow eyes now focused solely on her, demanding her decision. The light from the red door beckoned. She stepped toward it, feeling the pull, like gravity shifting. Her son's small hand smashed against her side. "Mom, we can't stay here," he cried, desperation cracking through his voice. "Okay," she suddenly blurted, heart racing. She didn't have time to think. "We go through." They moved together, each step echoing in the void. As Claire reached for the doorknob, a chill shot through her fingers. The instant she grasped it, a violent rumble shook the room. The mural's faces contorted in horror, their pleading cries warping into screams that clawed at the edges of her mind. "We shouldn't." Before she could finish her thought, she twisted the knob and yanked it open, dragging her son through the threshold. The light enveloped them, washing over them like water, a blinding, almost suffocating energy. Then silence. They stood in a new space, vast and empty. It felt almost sterile, yet there was a sharpness in the air, like it had recently been unsettled. The walls around them were stark white, smooth and unbroken, almost surreal. "Where are we?" the boy whispered, glancing up, searching Claire's face for reassurance that didn't come. She wiped a hand over her face to chase away the sweat. "I don't know." Her voice trailed off, uncertainty creeping back in. Shivers raced down her spine as she scanned the area, spotting doors lining the far wall. "Do you hear that?" Claire asked, holding her breath. A faint sound trickled through the air, like muffled whispers of a crowd just out of reach. "Yes," he cried, his small fist gripping her arm. "What is it?" "I don't." She spun around to see eerie glimmers of light dance along the edges of the doors, each flickering with a precarious life of its own. A sense of foreboding curled around her. "We need to find another way out. We can't open those doors." As if responding to her words, the whispers morphed into laughter, high-pitched and mocking, echoing around them. "Come play, come join us," the disembodied voices teased, wrapping around her like tendrils of smoke. With a stare so fierce it could pierce the dark, Claire grabbed her son's hand and pulled him toward the farthest wall, resisting the allure of whatever awaited behind the shimmering doors. "We have to keep moving." But as they walked, one door swung open with a sinister creak, slamming against the wall behind it. Inside, an inky blackness stared back at them, as if inviting them to step closer. The shadows inside beckoned, twisting into shapes that made Claire's heart race, taunting her with glimpses of a reality she feared to face. "Mom, we should go in," her son whispered, his voice a blend of curiosity and fear, as if he felt the whispers calling him too. "No," Claire shouted. Panic exploded within her. "We're not going in there." But the walls seemed to close in, the laughter rising, crashing against her resolve. A choice loomed ahead like a dark storm, the weight of fate heavy on her shoulders. In her gut, she felt the reality bend and twist, and with every second that passed, it felt like the boundaries between safety and doom were eroding. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker. Claire's heart skipped. This shadowy world was alive. "Mom," her son squeaked as the room trembled beneath their feet, and something within the darkness rustled with anticipation. "Run," she screamed, but where to? Before they could find the exit, the whispers began to rise again, morphing into something far more primal. "Join us. Join us." What awaited them was as real as it was terrifying, and Claire questioned her next move with each echo that filled the air. Would they make it out alive, or would they become just another shadow in the walls? The laughter grew sharper, filling the room with an electric thrill that twisted Claire's stomach into knots. She felt the walls pulsate with a rhythm, like a heartbeat. "Faster," she urged, pulling her son along, the whispering voices echoing through her mind, mixing with the pounding of her heart. They raced toward the closest door, its edges shimmering as if it were alive, waiting. Claire could almost hear the promises it whispered: freedom, salvation, but her instincts warned her to steer clear. She felt a hot breath of air brush past her as she passed with her son, like the unseen entities were hungry, ready to snatch them up at any moment. "Mom, I'm scared." Her son's voice rose, trembling with fear. The grip he had on her hand tightened painfully. "Just keep looking ahead," she replied, forcing herself to sound brave, to mask the tremor in her own voice. She scanned the stark slate of doors, each an unholy mystery of what lay beyond. The laughter morphed into voices of people she recognized, family, neighbors, and friends, their faces shifting in and out against the cold, white walls. "Claire, help us," she thought she heard her mother call out. Coldness glazed over her spine. "No," she yelled, "it's not real." As if her denial only strengthened their call, the walls around them seemed to shift and breathe, warping slightly. Shadows formed into grotesque shapes, clawing upward, their fingers stretching toward Claire and her son. She felt her resolve cracking, every breath growing heavier against the oppressive weight of those voices. Was there refuge between these walls, or a deeper horror? One door swung open sharply, dragging Claire's attention as a dark figure flickered briefly at the threshold. Did she really see it? Or was it just the corner of her eye playing tricks? It was too quick, too fleeting. She shook her head, moving her son closer, but in her heart, something was pulling her back. "Mom, they're coming," her son shouted, pointing down the hallway where shadows elongated and convulsed like veins winding their way deeper into the darkness. The walls seemed alive, trembling under the weight of her dread. She glanced around in desperation. "We need to hide," she said, looking for any nook or corner. A small alcove appeared at the far end, partly obscured from sight. "Over there." They sprinted towards it, her son's little legs barely keeping pace. But the shadows unfurled, buckling the air with an icy exhalation. Her breath hitched. Just as they reached the alcove, the laughter crescendoed, vibrating through her bones. They ducked low, pressing against the wall, desperately trying to quiet their breath. Claire held her son tightly, squeezing her eyes shut as if shielding them from the impending dread. She could still feel the sinister stirrings of the unseen entities sweeping through the hallway, teasing the edges of the alcove like a lover's caress, inviting, yet lethal. And then, silence. The laughter faded, only to be replaced by an eerie stillness that suffocated the air. Minutes crawled by, every second agonizing. Claire strained to hear anything beyond their small haven. She felt her son shift beside her, his small hand resting on her knee. "Mom," he whispered, the murmur laced with concern. "What if they see us?" "I don't know, but we'll be okay." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. She hoped desperately to believe them. Suddenly, a soft thud echoed down the hall, making both their bodies jerk. The darkness at the edges of the alcove felt alive, anticipation mounting in the stillness. A slow scratching noise followed, like nails clawing against the wooden floor. "Join us," came a haunting resonance, tinged with a familiar voice her own. "Mom," her son gasped, turning his wide eyes upward, looking for answers. Fighting to keep her mind clear, Claire pressed a finger to her lips, echoing a signal to be quiet. The scratching grew louder, reverberating against her bones. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to escape this creature lurking just outside. Her heart thundered, but as that door to their escape whispered in the distance a chance at something more, something terrifying yet intoxicating, Claire knew they had to make a choice. Did they confront the terror and face whatever claimed that invitation, or stay hidden, hoping the shadows wouldn't find them? In the stillness, a decision loomed, one that could determine their fate. All Claire could do was stare into the darkness, knowing that whatever waited would be both witness and judge. "What will you choose?" A shiver ran through her, the shadows flickering as the whispers returned, louder and pressing closer than ever, drowning everything in noise until all sense slipped away. Something shifted in the darkness beyond. Was it a figure? The tension thickened the air as she contemplated their fate. Could stepping into that abyss save them, or would it seal their doom? In the suffocating silence of the alcove, Claire's heart raced, an unrelenting drum echoing in her ears. She could feel the shadows pressing closer, as if they were woven into the very fabric of the air around them, threatening to envelop them entirely. The thick, heavy dread wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket. She had two choices: confront what lay beyond or remain hidden, yet imprisoning their fate in the darkness. "Mom," her son's voice trembled beside her. What if we just wait?" "Waiting isn't going to help," she whispered back, the urgency in her voice softer than she intended. "We can't let them make the choice for us." Outside, the scratching grew louder, persistent claws on wood urging her to act. It felt like a twisted game of chicken, the shadows daring her to step into their depths. With a surge of adrenaline, Claire made her decision. "We'll find out the truth," she murmured fiercely. "We can't let fear dictate our lives." Her son nodded slowly, squeezing her hand tighter. The warmth of his grip pushed back against the icy dread. It ignited something deep within Claire, a flicker of hope amidst the overwhelming darkness. On the count of 3, she began, holding her breath, feeling the very air thrum with anticipation. 1, 2, 3. They darted out of the alcove, hearts pounding as they sprinted toward the glowing red door. The whispers crescendoed into frenzied screams, amplifying the terror coursing through Claire's veins. But she couldn't falter now. Grasping the doorknob, she hesitated for just an instant, a heartbeat lost in an eternity. What awaited them beyond? Would it be salvation or doom? With a swift turn, the door swung open, bright light spilling onto their faces and flooding away the creeping shadows that clung to them. "What is this place?" her son gasped, stepping into the luminescence. The warmth enveloped them, and for the first time, Claire felt the heaviness lift slightly. It was a long corridor, each surface gleaming like polished ivory. "We must be in a different realm," Claire replied, trying to keep her tone steady. "We need to find an exit." "I don't like it here," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder, anxiety flickering in his eyes. "Stay close." They ventured further down the corridor, the whispers dying to a haunting hush behind them. At the end, another door loomed, this one adorned with intricate designs. Claire approached hesitantly, memories of everything lurking in the darkness spurring her on. But before she could reach for the handle, a voice flooded the air with an unnerving familiarity. "Come play forever." Her heart lurched. It sounded like her mother, the warmth of nostalgia twisted into something horrible. "No, get away," she shouted defiantly, clutching her son's hand tighter as if she could anchor them both in safety. They pressed through the door, breaking into a vast chamber drenched in light. Inside, the walls appeared to sway, alive with an energy that felt both welcoming and foreboding. Claire turned to her son, breathing heavily. We've made it this far. We can do this. But just as she scanned the room, it seemed that all the figures and faces they had encountered began to materialize against the walls, caught in a pale blue glow. Their anguished expressions twisted her heart. "Save us," they pleaded through cracked lips, reaching out with fingers that dissolved into shadows before her very eyes. "Leave us alone," Claire yelled, shaking her head, refusing to succumb to the despair that clawed at her. "You're not real." Yet just then, she felt a tug on her arm. The boy was staring at something within the room. "Mom, look!" He pointed, eyes wide with growing terror. Claire turned, her breath hitching. There stood a mirror at the far end, seemingly untouched by decay, reflecting the horrific figures behind them. It was a portal, a mirror to their souls. "Is that us?" he whispered, fear lacing his voice. It was her reflection staring back, twisted and contorted, whispering back promises of release. Claire recoiled, pushing her son behind her. "No, we won't let you take us." The shadows swirled in response, swirling around them like consuming smoke. The air thickened, and the whispers turned aggressive, screaming out her name like a siren call. Forcing her gaze back to the glimmering portal, she noticed the familiar beam of light shimmering brighter than anything she had seen before. It felt like hope shining through the despair. "Mom, the light!" her son cried, pulling her toward the mirror's reflection. "That's our way out." She glanced at the shadowy figures around her, feeling their pain wash over her. But as she locked eyes with her son, a fierce surge of resolve filled her. "We can't leave them behind," she spoke, voice surging with determination. "We can't save them all," he cried, voice rising with panic. "One step at a time," Claire insisted, "but we have to start somewhere." She took her son's hand, leading him towards the pulsating light resonating beyond the portal. Together, they stepped forward. The moment they crossed through, a blinding light engulfed them, the shadows dissipating into a wail of despair as if they could sense the separation. They were free, escaping the tormented faces once bound to the darkness. In an instant, they collapsed onto the grass of their front yard, breathless and alive. The air was cool and fresh, the neighborhood peaceful. "Where do we go now?" he asked, still shaken but eyes wide with wonder. "Now, we tell everyone our story," Claire said, brushing dirt from her knees. "We warn them. No one else should face what we did." As a gentle breeze swept past them, Claire felt lighter, the weight of countless eyes finally falling away. Together, under the glow of street lamps and against the shadowy silhouettes of the neighborhood, they walked, breaking the silence with tales of what lay beyond the walls, tales no one could afford to forget. With that weight lifted, Claire looked down at her son, that familiar warmth spreading through her chest. They made it back, together against the darkness that once threatened to swallow them whole. And in the quiet safety of their home, they knew they were the light that would shine into the shadows of the past, illuminating the path for others. But as the dark whispered one last time, "You'll never forget us," they walked on, stronger, unyielding, determined never to turn back to the horror locked behind those walls. Don't just sit there, friends. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes all the difference. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. And for the love of everything dark and twisted, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support and keep this narrative alive. Don't wait even one more second.